Okay, and we're live on YouTube. Welcome, everybody. This is the Pyramid Science Foundation channel. And this is Charlie Ziese and Lisa Richards, also with Stargate Pyramids. We have Charlie Ziese today as our speaker. He's going to present one of a series of presentations on his new book, 76.345. And oh, sorry, I have a little back feed going on right here for a minute. Let me turn this off. Okay, sorry about that. Charlie's going to present his book 76.345 in different parts throughout the next couple months. 76.345, Exploring the Hidden Secrets of the Golden Ratio. So in these descriptions or this presentation, Charlie actually demonstrates that a unique geometric angle fundamental to all physical reality is hiding in plain sight in nature and architecture throughout the world. These examples date back thousands of years and are found on all continents and in all major religious traditions. This unique angle is the geometry of Universal Phi Scaling. Charlie also addresses the troubling questions of how mankind came to lose this ancient knowledge. He lays out concrete examples of how the history and knowledge of the golden ratio, sacred geometry, fractals, the Fibonacci sequence, the ether, the Platonic solids in Western mathematics has been falsified and suppressed. Now, Charlie, if you don't know, if you're new to our channel, Charlie Ziese is actually the chairman of the board of the Pyramid Science Foundation, which is a nonprofit designed to conduct scientific research relating to the value of pyramids to human physical and behavioral health, the environment, agriculture, material science, and other affiliated areas of research. Charlie is also founder and creator of Stargate Pyramids, a unique line of meditation pyramids designed with a 76.345 degree angle. And today he'll explain why this is so important. Did we lose Charlie? Okay. Apparently, this channel is going to be difficult today. We have Jamai. She can't talk today because the voice isn't working on Zoom for some reason. We went through all the functions and we still can't get her her sound to work there. And Charlie will be back on here shortly. Now, while we're waiting for Charlie to come back, he's actually offering an amazing free PDF file of his book, 76.345, with every new purchase at Stargate Pyramids. So if you go to stargatepyramids.com and place a new order, you will get his entire book for free in a PDF download. That's just so amazing. He announced that on our last live, or our last video that we did. And I just thought that was so amazing of him. There you are, Charlie. I was just telling them about your free offer of the PDF file of your book and how generous that is, and exciting. We're also doing a couple different sales as well. So 40% off the Galactic line of pyramids. Once they are sold out, we may discontinue them for a short time until we reestablish a better way to produce them. Charlie, we can't hear you, dear. But we're also offering—
Now you can. Yeah.
Now, there we go. But we're also offering 20% off any of the pyramid accessories in the Stargate line of pyramids as well. And you can use coupon code Stargate20 for that. So Charlie, you missed probably part of your introduction. I didn't realize you were gone, but this platform seems to be giving us a hell of a time today.
All right. That's okay. Okay. Well, if we're ready, I'll just go ahead and start. I decided a couple of weeks ago that it was probably a good idea to try to document this in video format so that people on YouTube could who are interested in pyramids and maybe aren't aware of the book might find this and get interested in this subject matter. So anyway, I'm not sure how many this is going to be. I'll figure it out week to week, but I know it's going to be 8 to 10 sessions in any event. So today's is really just a general introduction I'm going to talk about the first couple of chapters in the book, and I'm going to pose sort of the global issues and questions that came about as part of the research, and that'll sort of give us a pathway as to where we're going to be going, as we move forward in weeks ahead. So anyway, with that said, I'll open up my screen and we'll get started. Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we'll begin. This is a cover page, which is, some of the objects are going to be familiar with you. The one on the left, obviously, that is a pyramid that was built in Russia with the 76-345 slant angle geometry built by Dr. Galit and his team some years ago. This particular one, although it's no longer standing, was outside of Moscow. And another example of this is shown on the cover of the book itself. That middle picture, the book cover, is from the Great Zimbabwe ruins in Zimbabwe, Africa. And finally, we see 76-345 in the torus, and we'll certainly be getting into this as time goes on, but I wanted everyone to know that yes, this ratio does come into play in the torus, and really ties the information that we have into the whole creative that I discovered into the creative process. So I'm just going to start off with a quotation that I found in a book on the golden ratio, or the golden section. It was this book is called The Golden Section: Nature's Greatest Secret. It was written by Scott Olson, but it gives us a kind of a great intro into the information that we're going to be talking about over the next 8 to 10 sessions. Nature holds a great mystery, zealously guarded by her custodians from those who would profane or abuse wisdom. Periodically, portions of this tradition are quietly revealed to those of humanity who have attuned their eyes to see and ears to hear. The primary requirements are openness, sensitivity, enthusiasm, and an earnestness to understand the deeper meaning of nature's marvels exhibited to us daily. Many of us tend to walk through life half asleep, at times numbed, if not actually deadened, to the exquisite order that surrounds us, but a trail of clues has been preserved. And really what I feel I've been fortunate enough to be able to do over the last several years is to find these clues and start to put them together in a way that hopefully mankind will realize that not only is sacred geometry something that's important, it's been around and our cultures have known about it for thousands and thousands of years. It's in nature, it's in our architecture, in every continent, every religious tradition, and yet we don't know about it. And that to me is just as important as the information that we're going to be learning about over the next 8 to 10 sessions. So I just want to start with some introductory ideas. We live in a vibrational universe, and vibration or frequency can be manipulated by our consciousness. In fact, recent research demonstrates that consciousness is the element that creates our reality. And we're not going to go into that today. We're going to talk about this in future ones, but there are experiments that demonstrate this very fact. And I think if there's nothing more important that you get out of these sessions, perhaps this is it most importantly. The research is out there that shows that consciousness, our thoughts, our collective thinking, is what creates our physical experience. Thought, or any vibration for that matter, can be amplified by specific geometric forms, specifically those incorporating the golden ratio. And for those who don't know what the golden ratio is, we'll be talking about that shortly. But it is critical. It's a critical component in the ability to amplify vibration and amplify its effects. 76,345, why is it important? It's the angle associated with universal Phi scaling, a phenomenon demonstrated through the research of Nassim Haramein, Dan Winter, and other researchers. Universal Phi scaling is the mechanism used by nature to scale all things from the subatomic to the galactic. I just want to stop here and go back and try to set a framework for those of you who believe that your thinking helps to create your experience. If you believe that that's true, then you have to also believe that there is a mechanism by which that high frequency thought is converted into our physical experience. And that's what we're talking about here in terms of scaling. There is a process in nature, which I'm only beginning to unravel, but this book goes a long way to do that, that there is a process. There is a mathematically precise, geometrically and harmonically precise mechanism for taking thought and converting it to our physical experience. So 76,345 is found in architecture, in natural phenomena, and in ancient and contemporary technology, all hiding in plain sight, yet we're not aware of it. Why? The reason we're not is because we have not been taught this information in school, and that's being done to prevent us from knowing our true power and the power of our consciousness to control our experience. On July 7th, 2020, I decided to write a book on the Russian pyramids and their amazing properties. But really a funny thing happened along the way as I continued to do more research. More and more examples of this geometry kept cropping up from all over the world. Viewers of my videos kept pointing me to more and more examples of 76,345. Some of these examples go back as far, excuse me, as 350,000 years. Examples of these include, and we'll be seeing these in the weeks to come, the Sardinian Nuraghes, the Scottish Brochs, the Great Zimbabwe ruins, castles and forts, Hindu and Buddhist temples, synagogues, mosques, Stav churches from the Nordic countries, Gothic and Neo-Gothic cathedrals, Egyptian obelisks, hieroglyphs, clock and bell towers, the Mayan calendar, Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. And there were college and university, government buildings, mystery school architecture, and Tartarian architecture as well. And there are also significant observations of 76,345 in nature. It turns out that a beam of light projected through a glass sphere refracts at 76,345. And similarly, a cheerleader megaphone that we've seen at college football and high school football games, those megaphones also use 76,345 to amplify sound. More recently, I was able to discover this geometry in places like power plant cooling towers, nautical examples like submarines, aquatic animals, and aeronautical applications like missiles, spacecraft, and jet airplanes. I also found it, actually the editor of my book found this one. It's in the iron furnaces that were very, very prominent in Pennsylvania and surrounding states during or prior to the development of steel. So the question comes up with all of these examples showing up, what was it that was causing this geometric angle to show up in all these different places? And what is the unique attribute of this geometry that gives it such a rich history in both nature and in architecture? And the answer to that is that 76.345 is the geometry of three-dimensional Phi scaling. We'll be talking more about that in a few minutes. But first, let's go over some basic concepts. What is sacred geometry? It's a term that, quite honestly, I was not familiar with until about 10 to 15 years ago. And so some of you still may not be aware of what it's all about. So sacred geometry describes the fundamental laws which create everything in our existence. These laws unite consciousness and matter, as well as science and spirituality. One of the primary tenets of sacred geometry is that mathematics, geometry, harmonics, and proportion are all directly involved in the miracle of creation. The ancient study of the interplay among mathematics, geometry, harmonics, and cosmology is found in the quadrivium, an advanced system of learning attributed to Plato. The book that I've written and what we'll be going through in these videos in the near future, that serves as a starting point for the rediscovery of this suppressed ancient knowledge. Now, at the bottom of the page, I have a picture of a book that came out several years ago called Quadrivium, and it's essentially a compilation of, basic facts about the quadrivium and the fundamental, tenets behind it. So one of the things I want to do is this is going to be sort of a discussion section, but I want to go through some of the discoveries that I made on the way to writing this book and some of the perplexing questions that really arise as a result of those findings. So we'll just go through these one by one. The first thing was the sacred geometry of the Russian pyramids was never disclosed to the West. As by way of digression, at the end of the fall of the Soviet Union, the scientific team attempted to publish all of their scientific findings in academic journals in the West, and they were summarily dismissed at each and every turn. There was not a single publication, academic journal that was willing to publish these well-documented research results. So the question that I come up with was this solely due to the fact that the journals refused to publish the Russian research when they were approached to do so? Or was there a concerted effort, perhaps on both sides, to keep this research from being published? I think there was an effort, perhaps and likely on both sides, to keep this information under wraps. After I determined the sacred geometry of the Russian pyramids, Lisa and I both had an opportunity to speak with Dr. Alexander Golod, the director of the Russian Pyramid Research in Russia. And, in the follow-up conversation, we tried to get him to confirm the 76345 calculations that I had done, but I never got a response back from him. So, the question also has to come up, was he prevented from verifying this information in some fashion? It didn't seem from our conversation that he would have gone silent, but I asked him some specific questions and really never got a response back from him. But after discovering 76345, I discovered that Russian pyramids share a common geometric angle with the Giza pyramid as well. We'll see that in a few minutes. Was I really the first person to figure this out? Or was this another example of suppressed information? I started to have to question everything at every turn because I was meeting so much resistance. And we'll see some examples of that. An Egyptian hieroglyph symbol meaning give is in the form of a pyramid with the precise 76345 geometry of the Russian pyramids. This can't be a mere coincidence. A symbol virtually identical to the Egyptian pyramid hieroglyph is found on the Mayan calendar, or alternatively, it's called the Aztec sun calendar. Isn't this evidence of a prior worldwide civilization that is being hidden from us? And just as an aside, I didn't put it in here, but there are new documentaries that are coming out that correlate the Egyptian pyramid artifacts and artifacts from Central and South America. So it looks as though, this is just further proof of a worldwide civilization. 76-345 can be found in the architecture of numerous civilizations dating back as far as 350,000 years, as we said earlier. Nuraghes, Great Zimbabwe ruins, Brochs, forts, Hindu Buddhist temples, mosques, synagogues, Gothic and Neo-Gothic cathedrals, obelisks, hieroglyphs, Mayan calendar, castles, and so forth. And in fact, even contemporary buildings, hotels, and tourist attractions contain this geometry. And as a parenthetical, every single Disney park in the world has a castle that has this geometry as part of its construction. So we're oblivious to all of this. And how could that happen? That's the big question. Are the contemporary architects that are building these replicas, I wonder if they're even aware of the significance of the geometry they are copying? I seriously doubt it, because this information has been lost. Here's another example of suppression of information. Through an interlibrary loan request I made back about 4 or 5 years ago, I attempted to obtain a copy of an essential research article by Russian torsion physicist Anatoly Yakimov. The article demonstrates that pyramids and cones incorporating phi into their geometry act as passive torsion generators. And what that means is they generate free energy. And after placing the request, I was informed by my local librarian that the US Library of Congress had the article. In fact, there was a second source as well that had it, and that I'd be getting a copy of it in a few days. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, each week I'd call. 8 weeks later, I was finally told that the article was now missing, not just at the Library of Congress, but at the other location, and that they were not going to be able to fulfill my request. After 8 weeks of waiting, I was forced to obtain a copy of it from a library in London, which I was able to receive in less than a week. So I just have to question, was this a case of purposeful concealment of this research? Because it does have a lot to do with healing and free energy technology. In another area of understanding, the knowledge of the Fibonacci sequence, the Platonic solids, fractals, and even our entire system of mathematics, they all pre-existed their introduction in the West by thousands of years. Yet we are told that all of these concepts were discovered in the past 50 to 2,000 years. 50 years ago, we were told that fractals for the first time had been discovered by Benoit Mandelbrot, which just is not the case, and we'll see that over time. So was this deception intended to hide the fact that ancient cultures that go back at least to the ancient Vedas knew about all of these areas of knowledge? You will be seeing this in the ancient Hindu temples as well. And would telling the truth about the origin, the true origin of this information, wake up too many people to the false history we've been taught? And they certainly don't want that to occur. So, we're going to see many examples of all of this knowledge being suppressed over the next few weeks. And it certainly points to the direction that there's a willful attempt to hide the origin of this information. Another example of ancient information is an ancient two-dimensional diagram of the Platonic solids, which, when it's plotted in 3 dimensions, demonstrates that 76-345 is the geometry associated with the progression of the Platonic solids. We'll be getting into this more, but many people, from the ancients up to Buckminster Fuller, who was a 20th century futurist, have theorized that the Platonic solids act, even though there's only 5 of them and there's essentially 12 keys on our keyboard, but the Platonic solids act as keys on the keyboard. And just as there are octaves on a piano, forms use these 5 Platonic solids to grow and to decrease in size in a process which, we are only beginning to understand in our contemporary world, but this knowledge was known for thousands of years. Otherwise, we wouldn't see this architecture and this geometry as often as we do throughout the world. So the question is, this diagram is found in a very highly regarded sacred geometry book written by Robert Lawler, yet no one, including Lawler himself, had previously disclosed the three-dimensional nature of this diagram and its relationship to 76-345. Maybe I'm the first person to rediscover this, but I have to question, how could this ancient knowledge be hiding in plain sight without our knowing about it? This is a diagram that's published in Lawler's book, and it's been out there now for over 40 years. And to my knowledge, no one has ever deciphered the three-dimensional context of the diagram. And it is powerful in its implications. The ether, despite having been a fundamental part of science and cosmology for thousands of years, was abruptly discredited and removed from Western science approximately 100 years ago. Was there a concerted effort to suppress the existence of the ether? It certainly seems so, because pyramid energy fields, in fact, the process of creation itself is all totally dependent on the ether, the existence of the ether. And to go further, was Einstein's initial denial of the ether, which he did subsequently recant, also an attempt to eliminate the ether from contemporary science? And now finally, on a more speculative note, was Einstein actually a disinformation agent who purposely threw the scientific community off track? Torsion physics, which is predicated on the existence of the ether, never really caught on in the West, despite it being readily accepted in Russia. A lot of the reason for that is that the Western scientists did not follow the specific protocols that the Russian torsion physicists, primarily in the early days, Nikolai Kozyrev, had used in his experiments, and therefore we could not replicate those experiments in the West. And although we have plenty of scientists today who have realized that physical properties cannot be explained without the existence of the ether, our scientific orthodoxy still prohibits discussion of the ether. So current day scientists whose research points to the existence of the ether must now resort to making up their own terms, such as the field or the source field, in order to come up with terminology that does not fall into the crosshairs of the scientific orthodoxy, which continues to refuse to acknowledge the existence of the ether. The Catholic Church has suppressed knowledge of Phi in both music and geometry for centuries. What is the rationale for this? Why would they do this when the golden ratio, or Phi, and sacred geometry are some of the most tangible proofs we have of a cosmology based upon a higher universal intelligence? In another sector, witch and wizard hats use 76-345. They've been around for a long time, are continuously used today in movies and television series and contemporary culture, yet they were the basis of the dunce cap developed by 13th century Franciscan priest John Duns Scotus to achieve higher states of consciousness. The Catholic Church vilified Scotus and the dunce cap, and in fact turned both into an object of ridicule and derision. Is this a deliberate attempt to vilify 76-345? The quadrivium, which we discussed earlier, has essentially disappeared from Western intellectual thought. Does the Western penchant for reductionism, and for those of you who don't understand that, we are not taught to think holistically in our educational system anymore. We are taught to perform specific tasks and essentially to leave critical reasoning to others and let others think for ourselves. But essentially, the question is, does the penchant for reductionism play a role in hiding this ancient wisdom? I certainly believe so. Is it a means to keep people from thinking holistically and putting together an accurate depiction of cosmology and our role within it? 76-345 is the geometry. We mentioned this before, the megaphone and refraction of light sphere. How can both amplification of sound and light refraction be directly linked to 76-345? And this knowledge is not even known or taught in our science and engineering curriculum. That's a tough one to answer unless you come up with the idea that this is being done on purpose. As I mentioned before, 76-345 is used in the design of aeronautical devices such as rockets, missiles, aircraft, spacecraft, as well as in the nose of boats, ships, and submarines, all as a way of increasing speed and decreasing drag and turbulence. 76-345 is also the geometry used in power plant cooling towers, and it was chosen because of its ability to maximize airflow for optimum cooling. Are the engineers, and here's the question, are the engineers who design these towers, nautical and aeronautical devices aware of the sacred geometry involved? Or was this geometry discovered through wind tunnel testing or other types of research? In my discussions with numerous types of engineers, water engineers, audio engineers, aeronautical engineers, they all indicate that sacred geometry is not covered in engineering curricula, leading to huge amounts of wasted time, money, and effort in designing these types of applications. 76-345 is also found in ancient headwear of the Buddha, of all of the ancient Hindu deities, and other Eastern religious traditions. Why would headwear incorporating 76-345, such as the witch hat and the dunce cap, be vilified in the West, yet continue to be revered in Eastern religious traditions? Contemporary Hindu temples continue to incorporate 76-345 in their architecture. I've looked at numerous examples of 20th century Hindu temples, and they all have it. By contrast, 76-345 is rarely used today in contemporary Western Christian churches, steeples, despite it having been the predominant steeple geometry until about 100 years ago. Today, not a single steeple manufacturer in the United States makes a stock 76-345 steeple. I'm sure they can make one for you custom, but they do not sell stock examples of this anymore. And why did that happen? Is there a purposeful suppression of 76-345 going on in Western Christian church architecture? There are drawings of electrical illumination at least 200 years before Edison supposedly invented the light bulb. Many of these drawings depict lighting emanating or being powered by pyramidal objects incorporating 76-345. Even Dr. Galad's Russian pyramid research team has calculated that it would take all of the electric generating capacity in Russia to produce the energy field generated by one 22-meter tall Russian pyramid. Why is history not telling us the truth about free energy and the role of 76-345 in energy generation? There are numerous examples of religious and secular architecture with the alternating red and white horizontal stripe pattern associated with energy production and transmission. We'll be showing you pictures of this in future episodes, but many of these buildings also contain 76-345. Shouldn't this lead us to question whether the original purpose of these buildings may have been in power plants? And in fact, most of the examples we'll be seeing are of buildings that are currently used as either churches or mosques. So interesting questions here. The floor of the St. Peter's Basilica in Rome has numerous cymatic diagrams. For those of you unfamiliar with cymatics, cymatic diagrams are the geometric forms which result from specific sound frequencies. Shouldn't this lead us to question whether the original use of this and other religious buildings was for healing? The symbols, in fact, to continue along this line, the symbols of the three major Abrahamic religions, namely the Christian cross, the Jewish Star of David, and the Islamic crescent, are all excellent fractal antennas, as it turns out. Is it possible that these religious symbols were created to hide the original purpose of these buildings as healing centers and or power generating plants? Why else would the Taj Mahal, a supposed Hindu temple, have a crescent on the top of its dome? The Tartarian Empire is another area that we'll get into. It was an advanced worldwide civilization. Some of you may not be aware of it, but information on this is exploding rapidly on the internet. But it was an advanced worldwide civilization possessing free energy technology and vibrational healing, all of which is related to 76-345. Knowledge of Tartary has literally been written out of our history books, both in the West and in Russia. How did both Russia and the West coordinate the elimination of Tartaria from world history, and why? Well, here's some of the answers. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, a series of accidental, quote unquote, fires destroyed large portions of major cities around the world. In addition, a large number of world's fairs and expositions were held around the world in Tartarian architecture. After the fairs were over, the buildings were quickly demolished, systematically destroying much of this grand architecture. How was this systematic destruction accomplished and coordinated? And finally, numerous free energy structures incorporate 76-345, including Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, the Great Zimbabwe ruins, which have been tested to have enormous energy fields around them. The Russian pyramids we just saw create enormous energy fields, and Hindu and Buddhist temples and power plant cooling towers. All of these are free energy generators. Could the significance of 76-345 in generating free energy be the reason this information is being suppressed? So that's a lot of information, a lot of questions, a lot of knowledge, and you probably are overwhelmed right now by those ideas, but we're going to continue to work through these during the coming weeks. But the evidence supporting these ideas is actually quite compelling. And as you proceed through this series of videos, just try to keep an open mind to the possibility that the worldview that you've come to accept, and in fact has been indoctrinated into you, may not be true. And then you can decide for yourself. And I'm going to finish this section up with a quote from the Buddha. The Buddha said, "Do not believe in anything simply because you've heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it." We're going to finish up today with some general introductions to the golden ratio. I want to let people understand what the golden ratio really is. The golden ratio is essentially a relationship between the lengths of two different objects. If you look at the diagram, the equation is A is to B as A plus B is to A. And what we're essentially saying is there's a magic ratio that will allow this formula to work and scale things from, the subatomic down to the galactic. And that's what, the golden ratio is all about, coming up with a relationship that will allow you to take and add two numbers together to the third, or subtract two numbers to come up with a third if you're getting smaller, and in the scaling process. So the golden ratio is really not a number. It's not a real number in any event. A real number is a number that can be expressed as a ratio of two other whole numbers. And the golden ratio will not fit that definition. It is rather a relationship which we approximate as 1.618. You see it down there at the bottom, which is approximately equal, because it's an infinitely irrational number, to phi, or the golden ratio. Now I'm going to do just a little bit of a demonstration here of some fundamental scaling ideas based upon the Fibonacci sequence. Most of you have heard of that before, but an interesting way to derive the golden ratio is through the Fibonacci sequence. Leonardo of Pisa, also known as Fibonacci, was a 13th century Italian mathematician credited with discovering the unusual properties of a numerical series that now bears his name. In reality, Fibonacci, by his own admission, states that he learned about this series from Indian mathematics, an example of how our history has been distorted to hide the ancient origins of sacred geometry. Now, the Fibonacci sequence begins with the numbers 0 and 1. Each successive number is determined by adding the two previous numbers in the series. Thus, the third number of the series is 0 plus 1 equals 1. And then if we go down to the bottom line, we can add 1 and 1 to come up with 2, 1 and 2 to come up with 3, 2 and 3 to come up with 5, and so forth. So that's the way the Fibonacci sequence is determined. And now we're going to talk about a concept of phi convergence. How can we use the Fibonacci sequence to, excuse me, to come up with phi, or the golden ratio? In order to arrive at phi, or more precisely, to more closely approximate it, because we can never figure it out precisely, the next step is to divide each number in the Fibonacci sequence series by the preceding number. Thus, if you remember, 1 divided by 1 would be 1, 2 divided by 1 would be 2, 3 divided by 2 would be 1.5, and so forth throughout. Now, if you look at the chart below, you're going to see that that has been graphed at this point, and you'll notice that there is an oscillation. You see where phi is located on the graph. And that what happens each time you do this ratio, there's an oscillation of the result, and it's above and below the theoretical value of phi, or the golden ratio. And the oscillation is much more profound at the beginning of this series, but the band of oscillation narrows very quickly. And if it were theoretically taken to infinity, which you can't do, we would arrive at a true number for phi. This is called the phenomenon of infinitely approaching a particular result is known as an asymptote, something that can be approached but never actually reached. But this effect is known as phi convergence, and this is one way of achieving the golden ratio. Now, an important thing that I want to get across today, because this is so crucial to the idea of three-dimensional phi scaling and the idea of using 76-345 in the creative process, is this topic: phi convergence and the Fibonacci sequence. It's important for you to know that the Fibonacci sequence which is traditionally deemed to be represented using the initial number pair of 0 and 1, is not the only set of initial number pairs that result in this phi convergence phenomenon. Unfortunately, so many researchers in this area are under this mistaken assumption that the Fibonacci sequence beginning with 0 and 1 is somehow unique among number sequences in its ability to achieve this phi convergence. And I think that that's one of the reasons that no one's ever proposed the general Fibonacci formulas as the model for universal Phi scaling. And I will be doing that in later segments here, but I want to give you the basics today so you can begin to think about them and have this start to sink in. But although the process of Phi convergence is real, as is the ability of the initial number pair of 0 and 1 to produce it, Phi convergence occurs whenever the general Fibonacci formulas, those formulas that we used, just taking the two previous numbers to achieve the third and then doing the ratios based on the two previous numbers. Those are the general Fibonacci formulas. And when you use those, that Phi convergence occurs no matter what numbers you use as your initial numbers. Now, I want to show you this very quickly so you can just see this for yourself. In yellow, I've put together the Fibonacci sequence based on the Fibonacci formulas and the initial numbers of 0 and 1. And you'll see that here are the resulting numbers in this column that I'm following with my cursor here. And then here are the ratios of the two previous numbers, doing this what's called recursively, using the previous information to come up with the next iteration. But you'll see that the ratio in the first example goes from 1 to 2, 1.5, 1.666, 1.6. You can see it's bouncing around, but very quickly it hits 1.618, which is Phi to 3 significant digits. And then this is done 24 times. If you go down to the very bottom, you'll see 1.61803399. That is Phi accurate to, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 significant digits after the decimal. Now, if you go to the next series where my cursor is, you're going to see what I did was I took the first number of 10 and a second number of 4, and I did exactly the same thing again. And we come up with the resulting numbers in the series, and we come up with the resulting ratios. And as you can see, although the initial numbers are a lot different, it doesn't matter if you start with a larger number and then go to a smaller number. You're going to see this phenomenon of Phi convergence. And sure enough, by the time we're through 24 iterations, we have achieved Phi to 8 significant digits. Now, on the right-hand side, I've done the same thing with negative numbers as well, just to show you that this all works. 500 is the first number, minus 150 is the second number. And as you'll see, we still achieve Phi convergence to 8 significant digits within 24 iterations. Same thing here in the final column, I have minus 5 and minus 10, and we achieve the same result. Now, what I've shown on the bottom of the page, and this is equally as important, for this to work as a model for universal scaling, it has to work both as things get larger and also as things get smaller. So what I've done is I've taken the very same numbers in each case. In the first column, you'll notice I have the first number is 46,368, which is the last number in the ascending or increasing set of numbers. And then the second number is 28,657, which is the next to the last one. And what I've done is I've begun subtracting them. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the formulas, the ratios all stay the same so that the scaling works both on an increasing and decreasing basis. And the same thing is true for the other three examples as well. So the Fibonacci formulas have the unique ability, in my opinion, to act as the universal scaling formula for the creative process in nature. And again, to point out the torus, I'm going to show you some scaling here in a minute. I showed you this on the front page. This is actually an award that's given called the Fundamental Physics Prize. It's the most lucrative academic award in physics awarded on the planet. And they give out a model of the torus, kind of as their equivalent of the Academy Award, Oscar, or something like that. But sure enough, we found 76,345 inside the torus. And I want you to keep this in mind as we move forward to the next section. What I'm trying to show here is that we can take any two number pairs and we can plot those. In this case, I'm plotting them in a decreasing fashion. But if you'll notice, this looks an awful lot like the bottom half or the lower horn of the torus that's in the previous example. That's why I put these together the way I did. Now, what I did in this example, just to show you how the torus and Phi scaling can accommodate all number pairs, I wanted to show you what happens when you don't use Phi as your universal scaling constant from the beginning, but allow it to sort of, occur on its own, as we've noticed, through the natural process of using the Fibonacci formulas. So starting from left to right, I hope this makes some sense, but in each case, what I did was I took a bottom circle or sphere in 3 dimensions of a height of 10. And when I say 3 to 1 in the first example, what that means is I've divided the second diameter by 3. So in other words, rather than having a vertical height of 10, in this case, it has a vertical height of 3.333. And then the same, we keep doing this though as we move forward, going forward. What you'll notice is that the 76,345 geometry is found at the top of each of these plots, but you'll notice that the scale falls off as we get towards the end, and we have these ratios that are not 1.618, to begin with. But you'll notice that at a 3 to 1, we have a very wide curvature at the bottom. The next one, the curve is not quite as dramatic. And then when we use 1.618 or Phi as our natural scaling constant, you'll notice that the resulting 76,345 geometry, which will hits on all edges of every one of the circles. So this is a perfect match. Now on the right, we've used relationships of 3 to 2 and 10 to 7, which comes out at 1.429. You'll notice that at the bottom, unlike over on the left-hand side where we actually, the line has curved outward, you'll notice that drawing a straight line, the bottom circles aren't connecting on the 3 to 2 relationship. And there's even more space between the lines on the 10 to 7 example, or 1.429. So, but no matter what we're seeing is that no matter what numbers we begin with, and remember, this is happening to infinity. So what we're seeing here, these anomalous, results where we don't have perfectly straight angles, is really occurring on what I'm going to call the event horizon, which becomes our physical experience. Now here I'm going to show quickly, all right, how did I start all of this? And I started it by trying to derive the 3-dimensional geometry, or the sacred geometry, of the Russian pyramids. And essentially what I did, I took that example from our previous case, the middle example here, where everything fits perfectly together. And you'll see I started with a circle with a diameter of 1. I divided and then divided that by phi to come up with 0.382, 0.236, and so forth. Then I put the lines, as I did in the earlier example, precisely on the edge, and they precisely met the edges of all of the circles that I had drawn. I only drew 15 of them. You can't even see all of them here. It would take an infinite number of circles, so I just stopped at 15. But you'll notice on the next example here that the geometry of this is 76,345. And sure enough, when I went to measure it with my protractor app, it measured perfectly with the geometry of the Russian pyramid. So that's essentially what happened. As I mentioned before, the Russians never gave away this information, never told us the basis upon which this geometry was derived, but I was able to reverse engineer it and figure it out. Here's some other interesting information. People always ask, well, gee, this is such a different looking pyramid than the Giza pyramids. Is there any relationship? And as it turns out, from a sacred geometry standpoint and from the perspective of the golden ratio, there's an amazing correlation. So I'm going to go through this real quickly. This is kind of complicated. I'll go through it. You can see the picture of the Russian pyramid, top left, and then below it, a picture of the Giza pyramid. Those two depictions you can see are what I graphed. I graphed the Russian pyramid and then inside of it, the Giza pyramid, and I assumed a common base length of 2 to put everything into proportion. So if you look at the diagram on the left, you'll see at the bottom right-hand corner, that angle, 76.345 is what's called the slant angle of the Russian pyramid. The apex angle of the Russian pyramid at the top here is 27.309 degrees. The apex angle, however, of the Giza pyramid, which is shown here next to my cursor at point E, is exactly equal to the slant angle of the Russian pyramid at 76.345 degrees. Now, I don't know if this helps in the bottom left-hand corner here, but I've got that same picture from the Giza pyramid that's up here. And what I did, I turned it over on its side to show you how those two angles relate. The base angle, the slant angle of the Russian pyramid when you turn is exactly the same as the Giza pyramid when you turn it over on its side like that. So hopefully that helps you. There's also, we find the golden ratio in all of these pyramids. The height of the Russian pyramid is 2 times the square root of phi cubed. We'll be getting into the math later, but you can see phi is everywhere. The slant height, which is from C to B, is phi cubed. So phi is everywhere in both the Giza and the Russian pyramid geometry. But we now know that the 76,345 is the angle of 3-dimensional phi scaling. Before we finish up, I'm going to show you just a few examples of this in nature. I mentioned earlier that light refracts at this geometry. This is on the left an example of an experiment that was done by a researcher several years ago. He took a glass sphere and put it at the end of a pipe and then shone light through it. And essentially what he did was to measure the angle of refraction. And this protractor I was using at the time was only good to 2 significant digits, but it came, as was the one for the megaphone on the right, but came out to 76.34 degrees, which is as precise as I could get it at the time. Here also is an example of a megaphone, which has this exact same geometry as well. Probably this one should be the most impactful of any of these slides in nature. 76,345 is inherent in our DNA. And you can see on the left, I measured this in the slant angle again within, the accuracy of that particular protractor app I was using at the time, 76:345. We have the ratios of 0.618 and 0.382, which are all golden ratio relationships as well that show up in DNA. So we've probably just about hit our time limit for today. That's about an hour. So we're going to stop for today. Hopefully this has been a good introduction. Next week, next time, what we're going to do, part 2 is going to be a discussion of 76:345 and ancient conical structures. So that's where we're going to stop for today. I am happy if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, great presentation, Charlie.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
That's a lot of information there. So you may want to go back and, listen again.
I love listening over and over because I pick up something new every time. There is a lot of information presented.
Well, that's right. That's right. So let's see if we have anything here.
Let me look on YouTube and see if there's any questions.
I don't think so. So, well, if there aren't any questions, I'm happy to, Lisa, do you have any comments?
Well, I just want to let everyone know the same thing that I did at the beginning. Charlie is being super generous and offering a free copy of his book for all new orders placed on the Stargate Pyramids website. So you go to stargatepyramids.com and place your order. You're going to get a free PDF download of Charlie's book and just tons of information in there, tons of it. That's what I mean. He's going to be doing presentations over the next couple months to just cover all that information in there for you. Yeah. And it's amazing. And then we're also doing a 40% off sale for the Galactic Pyramids. Once the Galactic Pyramids are all sold out, we're going to discontinue the line until we figure out a better way to produce them. And then we'll bring them back, I'm sure bigger and better than ever. And we're also offering 20% off accessories in the Stargate Pyramid line with coupon code Stargate20. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone. And then next week, do we know?
I'm not sure yet our confirmation for next week yet, but we are definitely, we're going to be back every week now. We had a little bit of a lull. Our break is over. We're back again in full swing. So.
Next week it's pictures, so there's not any math next week.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Charlie. Thank you everyone for joining us, and take care and have a great day. Lots of love to everyone.
Thank you.